Hi, it's Andrew here, and welcome to another week of Subject to Finance on Monday the 14th of August. I said last week, because there's not much going on at the moment in terms of the marketplace, that I'd do a little bit of an update on the question that we get asked all the time, which is what's going on with home prices and what can we expect to see in the future. Outside of, and I'll get onto that in a sec, but outside of that really at the moment there isn't a great deal going on. Interest rates are sort of sitting around the same place that they have for the last few weeks. It does feel a little bit like they've kind of reached a bit of a plateau. Banks aren't making as many adjustments as they were, and generally banks are just a bit more settled in terms of changes to their rates and terms and conditions and bits and pieces. So yeah, as we're in a low, or in a lull I should say, let's talk a little bit today about house prices. Now we're just the advisors in terms of home loans, and I'm sure as real estate agents you have a much better idea as to what's going on with market activity. It's great to hear from some of you that you're picking up and that there's a little bit more sales activity going on. Some of what I'm hearing kind of aligns to the key things that I'm picking up when I read what's going on at an industry level. So yeah, I mean, I've just got about half a dozen notes here that I've sort of taken from different sources or heard through different occasions. There seems to be a sign of a deceleration in terms of the lowering of prices across the board, and that deceleration has been going on for the last 4 months, so it's a consecutive slowdown in terms of that change in price year on year, which is very much a positive. The QV house price index for July showed a 1.5% decrease, which, although that sounds kind of like a decrease, and you know it'd be nice to see it going up, compared to April-May, it's quite significantly different, where you know they were at 3.5%, 3.4%. So it seems to be slowing down. On average, things are, or as a marketplace, house prices are down 10.2% year on year now. And if we look back to what we're sort of seeing, you know, year on year, if we go back to April, I think we're looking more at sort of 12% year on year. So that's starting to, that softening is starting to come off, and it's starting to improve a little bit. And in some areas, and you might know them as agents, such as Hamilton, New Plymouth and Christchurch, we're actually seeing positive growth. So a lot of what's sort of going on in terms of the overall average price and the year-on-year decrease in that relates to Auckland. So Auckland's playing quite a big part in that. Average house price at the moment across New Zealand is $889K. Just talking about those certain regions of resilience, yeah, I mentioned Hamilton, I mentioned New Plymouth, Christchurch, but even some of the other smaller regional towns such as Invercargill are actually holding up quite well and are showing growth. So yeah, it's an interesting mix. You know, a small town like Rotorua in the North Island still seeing year-on-year decreases, a small town in the South Island such as Invercargill seeing some upside. So it's very regional still in terms of what's going on, and it probably has a lot to do with what's going on in terms of the economics of the region that they're in. Yeah, to look at where some of the biggest losers are, I guess it's probably where some of the biggest gains were made in the prior year. So, you know, Auckland, Wellington, Nelson, Queenstown, and actually Rotorua are kind of good examples of that, where, you know, going back to 2020, they saw some pretty amazing gains, and so they've had a little bit more to lose coming back off the other side. So yeah, some of it's probably more to do with what happened on the way up and how far up they went as to how far they can drop. You know, it's one of those things, the higher you fly, the further you've got to fall. QV, I think it was James Wilson at QV, sort of came out with a few notes around his observations, and you know, some of the things that he attested to were that a lot of what influences this sort of stuff is just sales volumes, and it is very true. So, you know, if there's not a lot of activity going on, not much coming to market, then there's a lot less to measure. And so that certainly affects these numbers, and whether or not we'll start to see that open up a bit. I think we're seeing it in certain types of product in markets like Auckland, where there is still new product coming to market, which is opening up activity in terms of sales activity for real estate agents, but there is less of, say, the sort of standalone market available at the moment. So, still needs a little bit more confidence in terms of those selling to get into the market. It probably needs a little bit more sunny weather, and as we go into summer, hopefully we'll see some of that. REINZ put a report out for their numbers up to June, I think it was. June 22 versus June 23, again actually quite positive. Year on year, a 14.6% increase. So, that's quite substantial. That's I think something that's quite nice to reflect on. And excluding Auckland, sales counts increased by about 3,761 properties in that same year-on-year comparison. However, and it comes back to big market that Auckland is, if we look at that overall picture, the number of properties for that same period have decreased by 6.1%. So that really shows that point that James Wilson from QV made around, big market being Auckland, not enough properties in terms of supply side, and Auckland needs to loosen up and open up for us to start to see some actual change overall in these numbers, just in that it represents so much in terms of the volume at a country level. So the Auckland region's important in terms of making these numbers accelerate over the months ahead. So other points to note, REINZ Chief Executive Jen Bard also made a point that they were seeing increased activity in first home buyers, and that's something that as an industry we're seeing. I've talked about that quite a bit. There's actually a lot of activity out there in terms of first home buyers, a lot of pre-approvals. We need to get those people actually into houses, and that's the biggest challenge. But certainly things like the easing of the LVR restrictions from June 1st have really helped those first home buyers, and also just that there is actually quite a bit of the right type of product available out there in terms of suitability for first home buyers, the terraced housing, the apartments and bits and pieces. But we are seeing a lot of first home buyers struggling to find sort of standalone properties, and when they do, some of the things that they struggle with are being first home buyers are things like the issues around consented versus unconsented projects on the site. Was the deck consented? Was the pergola consented? Is it a big effect? Is it going to stop me from wanting to buy this property, or should I ignore it and move on? Will I get insurance? So they're asking a lot of questions, and I think that's where the relationship with the mortgage broker or advisor and finding a good advisor is really helpful for those people. But as I've said in previous podcasts, advisors linking up with real estate agents to actually solve some of these problems is essential. There's no shortage of pre-approvals out there for first home buyers. It's just getting them into those homes that's the tricky bit. So that's probably about it for me on the property piece. It's not looking too bad. I think we're seeing some signs of valuation starting to strengthen. Definitely seeing that outside of Auckland and some of the regions. Trend that way in terms of Auckland, most definitely. It's definitely showing signs, I think I said, as to those 4 consecutive quarters of slowing down. And it's the time of year where you actually should start to see some more activity as we come into summer, and that drives confidence in the marketplace, and hopefully we see more vendors coming to the market with houses. So that's it for me this week. Have a great week ahead, and look forward to hearing from you if you've got things that you'd like to ask in terms of the home loan side of things. We love your questions, and that's what I'm trying to build these videos off in terms of content. So, talking about where interest rates are, our views on home loan prices, these are all things that are coming through you guys. So keep giving us your ideas. You can contact me at andrew@tella.co.nz. Go onto the Tella website and contact myself or Ben or Krishana or any of the team that you'd like to. We're always open to a discussion. Talk to you soon. Cheers.